Just recently, and quite by accident, I was reintroduced to a book that's in the Apocryphal text called Susanna. It's a very short book, and honestly, I've read that before, but maybe 3 or 4 times in my life. It's so short. I study this stuff all the time. I just thought, well, it kind of has a familiar ring to it. I don't quite get it, and I didn't really remember what it was about. Lately, in the last few years, I've been working through this process of reading the material conceptually and finally understanding what the patterns that I'm seeing are doing and what they mean. I go back to Susanna now and read it, and it just lights right up. It's like a little jewel. Very short, wonderful teaching. It's going to be super fun for this one. My name is Dan Paulson. I'm an independent researcher. Welcome to the video. I'm not approaching this as a Christian or an atheist or a theist at all. I'm approaching this as somebody that sees patterns and very objectively, what is that pattern? I find that there is a mentally interactive step to turn inward with. All right, so what I'm going to be able to show in this video is a couple of things. Number one, that it is using a numbering pattern in the background with the word repeat counts that is common, and it's generated not just in Genesis, but if you go into Babylonian works, you'll find that numbering pattern preceded Jewish works. That numbering pattern is right here as well. This belongs with that material in the background that people are writing stories at the time, but we're not going to have these be part of the religion. They don't quite fit. There's something different going on with these. This one was kind of close. You know, people want it, maybe yes, maybe no. Anyway, it's close by. It's a very short story that's recognizable. We're going to see some components of other stories in here. I'm going to relate it to some Adam and Eve parts, but also some Abraham, Sarai, component parts up there, that those are going to emerge right here, and that there's a reason for those to be there. But also there's in this case, we're not going to see a macro numbering pattern, but we're going to see a micro numbering pattern that is in place, that you'll just have to see it. When I point it out, you'll go, wow, that's interesting. Is that a fluke? It's not a fluke. It continues to show up. In this case, now that I know what I'm looking for, that stuff is like right there. We don't know what to look for. We're looking at it all the time. We just don't look at it in the right way. So let's do that. First, let's go here and read. Okay, I downloaded this from the Jewish Women's Archive. I've got the website here at the top. This is Susanna the Apocrypha. This is authored by Jennifer A. Glancy. In brief, Susanna's story comes from a Greek manuscripts of the Book of Daniel and is included in the Christian but not the Jewish canon. It was written during the Hellenistic period after Alexander the Great's conquests. The story depicts a woman named Susanna, a wealthy Babylonian Jewish woman. 2 judges conspire to entrap her, threatening to accuse her of adultery if she refuses to have sex with them, but due to her strong faith, she refuses their advances, and they take her to the court and accuse her. She calls out to God, and God replies to her plea, sending a man named Daniel to reveal the judges as false witnesses and save Susanna from her death sentence. All right, I'll just read through this to get the history of it down. This is important. It's a very short book. It's only 1 chapter, so it's going to be a fun study. But let's cover this. Let's make sure we've got it all on the table here. Those who follow my work will recognize this numbering pattern right here. The reason I interrupted for a second is because this numbering pattern comes from the book of Genesis. These numbers are repeated over 6,000 times in the Bible, but what isn't known in the background is that names and places are also repeated that amount of times. That shows me that it belongs in the Abrahamic pantheon of material if it fits that criteria. Take a look at those numbers right there. We're going to look at some 7, 5, 3s, different things like that. If I was to come over to Susanna right here and take a look at this, what I know right off the bat is that they're going to be utilizing a name and number repeat sequence. I'm going to grab a few things up here. Joachim, wife, Susanna, and just take a look at a couple of things real quick. Lord. Six times. So that's on our number list here. Susanna. 10 times. Yeah, see what we have going on? It's part of Chelsea's here. Well, I'm going to do daughter first. Repeated exactly 7 times, part of the 7-3 grid. Chelsea's. exactly 3 times. Yeah, 3-7 grid. We're going to have repeats going on. I look at this and go, all right, I certify this as somebody writing with the same as the biblical material, just writing a different style. I see what's going on in the background. We're looking at a carrier shell here. All right, let's go back and keep reading on what there is. Background and introduction. The brief, self-contained story of Susanna appears in Greek, but not Hebrew manuscripts of the book of Daniel. Most modern editions of the Christian Bible included among the Apocryphal or Deuterocanonical books as Daniel 13. Although readers will respond to and remember most vividly Susanna and her predicament, the story's conclusion emphasizes Daniel's emergence as a young figure of wisdom. On account of this, some ancient Greek versions place the book of Susanna before Daniel 1. The text first introduces Joachim, a wealthy man living in the Babylonian diaspora. Joachim, however, plays a minimal role in the unfolding of the story. Susanna's introduction defines her in terms of her relationship to 2 men, as wife of Joachim and daughter of Hilkiah, and tells us that she is beautiful and righteous and was trained according to the laws of Moses by her parents. Joachim's house functions as a courthouse for the Jewish community. 2 elders who serve there as judges separately develop lustful feelings towards Susanna, whom they spy walking in the garden when the house empties at midday for the community to go to their homes for lunch. One day the 2 elders catch each other lingering behind in order to watch Susanna, and they conspire together to entrap her. On a hot day, Susanna decides to bathe in the garden. She believes herself to be alone with her maids because the elders have concealed themselves. When Susanna sends her maids away to bring ointments for her bath, the elders reveal themselves and try to coerce her into sexual relations. They say that unless she lies with them, they will testify that she sent her maids away in order to be with the young lover. Susanna's dilemma is this: to submit to the elders is to disobey the law of Moses, which she has been raised to follow. But to resist the elders is to invite the death penalty for adultery. She articulates her decision. I choose not to do it. I will fall into your hands rather than sin in the sight of the Lord. Susanna cries out aloud, and so do the elders. Their shouting attracts members of the household, specifically identified as servants, who, when they hear the elders' story, are very much ashamed, for nothing like this has ever been said about Susanna. The trial of Susanna. Susanna's trial occurs on the following day at her home, describes it as the house of her husband, Joachim. Susanna comes before the 2 elders and the people, accompanied by her parents, her children, and other unspecified relatives. Her husband is not mentioned. The lascivious elders ask that she be unveiled so that they may continue to look at her. Those who weep with her weep at this disgrace, which in Theodotion's version amounts to an unveiling of Susanna's face. The NRSV follows Theodotion's, an alternate Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. In the Septuagint version, Susanna is stripped naked in accordance with ritual Jewish law. The elders proceeded with their accusations. They claim that they saw Susanna in the garden embracing a young lover whose strength enabled him to elude them as they attempted to detain him. They further claim that Susanna has refused to cooperate in naming the lover. Because of the credibility of the elders in the community, the assembly believes them and condemns Susanna to death. No one offers testimony on Susanna's behalf. She, however, turns to heaven for help, crying aloud to God that she is innocent. The text records, "The Lord heard her cry," just as Susanna is being taken to her death. God stirs the Holy Spirit of a young lad named Daniel. Announcing that he cannot be part of Susanna's execution, he asks the assembly for the right to cross-examine the elders. Before the reassembled court, Daniel separates the 2 elders and questions each about the location of the lovers' intimacies. The first elder identifies a mastic tree as the site of the illicit coupling, and the second elder identifies an evergreen oak. Daniel thus reveals their deceit and the innocence of Susanna, a daughter of Judah, a descendant of southern Judah. The 2 elders are then sentenced to the fate they intended for their victim: death. At the close of the tale, Susanna's parents and husband rejoice, not because Susanna will live, but because she was found innocent of a shameful deed. Susanna's own reaction is not described. Instead, the text notes that, from that day onward, Daniel had a great reputation among the people. Okay, it goes on to describe actually a theoretical interpretation that I'm not going to go read because it takes us down a path that is about the external world. There's something mentally interactive in here on a template that I'm going to be working to find. So if I can't mentally interact with the interpretation that I'm getting from here, then I've not got the right material or I don't have it figured out. In this case, I can look at it and it's very recognizable. To that end, let's go take a look at it. What I'm going to describe here is I've got the book of Susanna downloaded from there's a site called kingjamesversiononline.org, and you can even get, it has the 1611 Tyndale or whatever Bible it was that had all of this stuff in it. So you can go there and just download you just copy and paste it. This was just a one-time copy and paste it from there right here into a text document. Presto, you've got just that quick, free, you've got it right on your computer. You just have to have a computer. Yeah, people are getting rid of stuff. Okay, so I've got it downloaded here, and I named it Susanna at the top, and to purposefully misspell anything that I add into my text so that if I'm searching, I don't accidentally add in counts. What I'm going to be doing throughout here is looking through a number of things, knowing already that if I had this memorized, there are things that I would know that I can't know without having it memorized, and that is how many times nouns and verbs can repeat in this. Without having it memorized, there's no possible way for me to know that. So utilizing the computer as my aid, I'm going to come through and start looking at things. There's stuff that I already know for sure, though, and I want to talk to you about something down here. I want to take a look at something down here, and actually, let me first say this one. There's not the verses were put in. This was just a story at one point in time. The verses were put in later. There's 64 verses, but at one point in time, it was not broken out this way. It just started out and it went start to finish as a story. So the verses were added in later. I want to make that clear. And it really looks like the work of Stephen Langton. I didn't go research to see if he did these too, but it really matches what he's doing elsewhere. Having said that, I want to come down here to verse 7, where Susanna went into her husband's garden to walk, and number 8, and 2 elders saw her going in every day and walking, so that their lust was inflamed towards her. What I want to do is take those two concepts on that 7 and 8 right there and jump right back into Genesis right in the beginning, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I have to stop actually before going on and make sure that I emphasize there's only one way to manage this. If it's going to be mentally interactive, then I have to mentally interact with it. The material is such that it is a coded story that plays out in my psyche. It's built on concepts carried with analogous verbiage, and it becomes a complex puzzle to resolve. In its simplest format, it would be something like an anchored ship cannot sail. That simply means that I am the ship, and what I'm hanging on to, I can't escape from. So there's something at that simple level like that, it's a metaphorical teaching that becomes deeper and deeper. So as I go through this, understanding that that is what is going on and that the Adam and Eve concept here, you have to treat it in one way only. And we're going to treat Susanna the exact same way. There's a mental hierarchy. And the female is the inner self. Eve is the inner self. Susanna is the inner self. Adam is the conscious. Joachim is the conscious. Okay, we're going to treat both of the stories exactly that way. They might be told from different perspectives. Third-person perspective, or from the victim, or from somehow somebody who's looking at it. You can tell that story in different ways, which adds another layer of complexity to it. But once you realize that there's one concept in the middle, you just look at it until you understand what that concept is. Okay, let's go to Genesis, and that's the way that I'm going to manage this. That the creation is about the creation of me, and what is going to unfold right through here is my life and my life experience, or the life experience of anyone, all the way up to the time that the world is raucous and needs to be destroyed and we turn inward to start a self-healing path. Right here, we're not there yet. We are in the beginning before the corruption happens in the Garden of Eden. Let's go look at and see what that looks like. All right, I have King James version of Genesis up here on my computer. This is the complete King James version, and I'm going to drop all the way down past the 2 creation stories right here at the end. This is where the 7-3 grid, the 7 and 3 appear at the end of this story. See how the 7th is said 3 times, and it ends. Where did Langton make sure it was pushed? He broke up these chapters to put that 7 and that 3, that verse 3 right there and that 7 together. He's helping us link these together. And that's going to be parallel to this naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden. That's how it works out if you continue to play with it, that this is a mental location for a person's development in life, and that those numbers are going to represent the same place. This is called Eden, but you can also use 3 or 7 or 12, 10, 20, 30, 40, etc. Those are numbers that are all part of that pool that all replicate this one place right here. So what do we have? We got our 7 and 3, and they're both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. They were in the garden. The man was in the garden, and the woman was created there. So the woman is in the garden with the man at 7-3. What did we just have over here? Remember, we just looked at this in Susanna back over here. Daughter, right there is said 7 times in verse 2. And then right next to it was Chelseus. Three times. So we got a 7 and a 3 right there. And right down here at 7, Susanna is in her husband's garden. Do you see all those number lineups right there? I never saw those before. I only see them now. And I see that it is Susan in the garden with her husband, or in her husband's garden with or without him. In the first story, it's with him. In this story, it's in his garden. He's not there. But this is both, in both cases, what this represents is, honestly, garden is your mind. It's the space. It's what you grow things from. It's analogous. So garden means the mind, the memory, all of the collection of things. And the female is actually what that is, if you go through the material. If it's mentally interactive, we have to pull it away from its characters and understand that those are analogous representations in their culture that are going to carry that story. But when you put it up here, they're going to fit in that hierarchy. The reason the woman is subservient to the man is because the inner self is a product of the way we decide and judge life and hold it and feel it and continue to feel it emotionally without mentally detaching from it. So we unbeknownst to us, just become products of life experiences. At this stage, we haven't started there. We're at a 7-3 start, and we're pure. We're in the garden at this point. This is the inner self that has not yet been corrupted. What happens next when we move from step 7 here in Genesis onto first sin, which would be called 8 on our numbering chart right here? And there's a reason for that. All right, back to Genesis, what we get into. Now, the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. Now, this is a long story. We know what it is, where the serpent tempts Eve, telling her that you're not going to die if you eat of that. Go ahead and do it. And she eats, and she learns the difference of between good and evil. And this represents judgments in life, that we are now making judgments and we are losing our pureness. We see that we are naked, and we're no longer naked. We're no longer spiritually naked. We're going to begin to cover ourselves. So we have this idea that we're going to go from a spiritually naked state to a spiritually covered state, which means I now have pain, shame, hurt, things I hide, things that I don't like. All of that is going to be represented by covering. Now, that's it. Step 8, first sin, represents step 8 in Abrahamic material. If we go back over here then to Susanna, right at verse 8, we go back and look at 7 and 8. The people departed away at noon. Susanna went into her husband's garden to walk. So there she is at 7. She's in the garden. Nobody's around. She's all by herself. And the 2 elders saw her going in every day, walking, so that their lust was inflamed toward her. We see that the temptation, this is representing life temptation in the way that the serpent did. But you can see that the alignment, the 7 and 8 alignment, that's what I want to point out here, is that numbering alignment that's being maintained, as well as the word count. As well as the word count. Let's take a look at something here. There's going to be 2. I already looked ahead. 2 people, the division. What happens? 2 comes up as 13. 2 is a division. 2 is a bad thing. We're going to be going through this material. What about Let's see. How about garden? Garden doors. That's a passageway. Garden doors. There's 4. Garden door. Garden door is 5. Door itself, because there are different portals, 8 times. Look at that. So it depends on which you're going through. There's something in this story that is nested in the background that people that can interpret it would know. Look how thick it is, though. You go back and say, okay, well, 2 is a division. That's not a good thing. The elders were the pervert guys, right? 13. Are we seeing what's going on here? There is a code in here that is telling us how to interpret this. They're following patterns that are very, it's a human life template. Let's keep moving on. What I've got to do is be careful here because there's so many places to go with this. Once you get it cracked into it, you see what's going on. The numbering pattern there, that's just to get your attention. That's just to say, okay, yes, there's something there. Let's listen to what a lot of people will say some stuff about this. All right, but I can find something here that puts it parallel to many other teachings, that suddenly a single human life template emerges. And that's what I'm working on here. So without the numbering pattern then, let's just go back and read through the verses in the story. I'm going to make comparisons, like I said earlier, between other parts of the story. But let's put ourselves into this. So right here at this point in time, then, they've established things up front. And then right there at 7 and 8, we ourselves, this represents, that the whole setup here is this, that the person has a lot more in the community. Okay, so there's a selected and a called person right there. And that they've got enough that they've got a big garden in their location. They got the space where everybody else comes and visits. That represents the place in our mind where all of the places come. If you were to go all the way back to Babylonian works, it would be Andaruna, the dwelling place of the gods. It's a mental place where we exist in all of our memories, but it's our conscious awareness. Whether we're acting it out or not, it is what is in our conscious current awareness right there. Okay, so that is where everything comes from. So that is, you're a certain person at this point in time. You have all the different qualities there. You've got help. You've got bad things about ready to emerge. What happens is that your beauty is there. Everybody has this beauty up front. Do you remember the story of Abram and Sarai in chapter 12 in Genesis? And Abram is afraid because his wife is so beautiful that he gives her up, saying, she's my sister. And Pharaoh takes her and gives Abram, there's a corruption that happens right there. What we're seeing right here is also that same place. She's beautiful. She's being observed. However, they also represent, not only do they represent serpent first sin, but they represent also Pharaoh corrupting the pure inner self early on, right after the beginning. That's what's happening here. Those 2 elders represent the divisions of life that want to have your corrupt pure inner self. That's the beginning of life right here. This is our childhood self on the template. And the 2 elders represent the divisions in life that we make, the Cain and Abel story. It'll go that way. Okay, let's go and interpret it then. I'm going to read it and just talk through it on those terms without the numbering system. I may refer to the numbering from time to time to help me understand whether we've got a good thing or a bad thing going on. They're going to weight those terms. The elder, you wouldn't know that. It's said 13 times. Okay, elder's a bad thing. We're looking for that kind of weighted values in the numbering system in the material using the computer because we don't have it memorized. We think we're big. We don't know this. Okay, so from what I read previously from the Jewish Women's site, we already have a good idea of what's going to happen through here, and I'll read through it. But basically, I'm just going to overview what's going to happen. In most of the stories, everything goes bad, and there's a healing that has to happen. This is a very unusual story because the corruption doesn't happen. The temptation is there, but it's avoided. Boom, it doesn't go bad, and a hero's journey doesn't start. This is self-contained. It's very short. If you were to take a pathway out of the Bible that is different, like there's 2 trees in the garden. What if you didn't partake of either one of them? Or what if you partook of the tree of life instead of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? There were options there that weren't exercised. What if in Cain and Abel's story you became Abel instead of Cain? There's options there. There's places where not everybody goes completely along the path. Not everybody becomes corrupted and needs to turn inward. Most people become corrupted and never do turn inward. So That is the process in the background of what is going on in humanity. This template is for the people that go in and resolve that. However, Susanna is one that took the option where the corruption was avoided. Susanna remained pure. I will say this, I've learned the stories and the interpretation well enough now to know that this story is one that emerges from the Garden of Eden, but when the temptation comes, instead of partaking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what is partaken of is the tree of life. So there's probably more of these. Susanna, now that I recognize what it is and how to read it, it's like, wow, that's a variation of something I haven't seen before. Or you know what? Like I said, I've read it before, but I never recognized what it was. Only now do I do that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take the time, I'm going to go through the book of Susanna. And what I'll do is read through we'll just go through it verse by verse. We'll start here at 7 or 8, kind of go through it very quickly, all the way down to how many there are. 64. Daniel. Let's make sure we take a look at Daniel up here on a word count. Better be a good number, huh? 6 times 6 is good. Okay. All right. Blood. 2. Interesting. There's a lot of 2s. Okay. Let's go back up and go verse by verse. I said I would stay away from that numbering, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So what happens here is in the beginning is that he was a great rich man and had a fair garden joining into his house. That's you're the calling right there. You're isolated out. And to him resorted the Jews because he was more honorable than all others. What he had was space. He had a garden and people came there. This almost seems twofold to me. Like, number one, you've got the space where everything, you have to, when you're thinking things through, you have to process it all in your mind, but you've got to process it in a certain way. But at the same time, this is showing that this called person has got a garden space that other people do not have. What is that saying? That there's a thought process that an individual has that other people do not. But that's an external layer. At an internal layer, really, at a mentally interactive layer, what you're looking for is up here anyway. So the outer layer doesn't matter. But you'll see that in play. Many are called, few are chosen. That doesn't say that here, but you can glean that out of this teaching right here. One person has space over others. The same year were appointed 2 of the ancients of the people to be judges, such as the Lord spake of. That wickedness came from Babylon, from ancient judges who seemed to govern the people. So we got to leave a past behind right here. These kept much at Joachim's house, and all that had any suits in law came unto them. So this is our Anderuna. Everything lives and resides in our mind. We're the called person. Everything is there. But everybody departed away at noon. It gets quiet. Everybody departed away. Let your mind go quiet. To Susanna went into her husband's garden to walk. There's your peaceful inner self. Life temptations come along. The 2 elders saw her going in every day walking so that their lust was inflamed toward her. And they perverted their own mind and turned away their eyes that they might not look unto heaven, nor remember just judgments. So they're just talking themselves into, yeah, it's okay. God allows it. And albeit they both were wounded with her love, yet does not one show one another his grief. So they both loved her, they both lusted after her, but did not let each other know about it. Because they were ashamed to declare their lust, and they desired to have their way with her. Yet they watched diligently from day to day to see her. So they're just like staring at this person. This is life temptation. You're in the garden. And one said to the other, let us go now, for it's dinner time. So the division happens. They both went out and they parted one from the other. They went their separate ways. They turned back again and came to the same place. And after that they asked one another the cause. They acknowledged their lust. Then appointed they a time both together when they might find her alone. So it sounds like these 2 guys go, let's depart. I'll see you later. You too. Then they come back. What are you doing here? What about you? Well, she's hot, man. I really got it. Yeah. So this would be like the point in the Sarai and Abram's story where there's kind of detail in here, but the Pharaoh wants Sarai. And Abram knew what was going to happen. So there's different ways of carrying a conceptual inner part. You have to look for what is the same in those stories, not what's different. And that takes a long time to do. Eventually, when you learn what is there, you find a way that this plugs into it. You know what is happening through examination of their story, their analog, putting yourself in their place, and then applying it to your own life, knowing it's an inward path. So anyway, this temptation happens. So the story goes on, and this is just a way to carry it, but the life idea here. And it fell out as they watched a fit time. She went in as before with 2 maids only, and she was desirous to wash herself in the garden, for it was hot. So they just went there to go watch, and they watched her for a certain amount of time. A fit time means like, the appropriate amount of time or whatever, a certain amount of time. And she was in there with only 2 maids, and wanted to wash herself because it was hot. There was nobody there save for the 2 elders that hid themselves and watched her. Remember that elder. Elder being repeated 13 times is the story code for placing it into the category of first sin, location, on the mental template. See the layers? We see life's temptation. So she said to their maids, bring me the oil and the washing balls. I don't know where that comes from. Other translations just, bring me stuff to clean myself up with, wash, bathe, oils, ointments, and shut the garden doors that I may wash me. What is wash? Should be clean up. 3. Yep, no doubt. Okay, bring me all that stuff. And she did, and they did as she bade them in the garden doors. So she's in there by herself. And when the maids of God, 2 men rose unto her, saying, behold, the garden doors are shut. No man can see us. We are in love with you. Therefore consent to us and lie with us. If you will not, we will bear witness against you that a young man was here with you, and that you sent your maids away from you. And Susanna sighed and said, I'm straitened on every side. If I do this thing, it is death unto me. If I do not, I cannot escape your hands. So she knows that they're going to tell her, have sex with us, or we're going to tell the whole town that you had sex with some man after sending your maids away. So she said, it's better for me to fall into your hands and not do it than to sin in the sight of the Lord. So she was like, go ahead. And with that, Susanna cried with a loud voice, and the 2 elders cried out against her. I don't know what that would be like. I imagine like some woman undulating someplace off, and the elders screaming and yelling or something. I don't know. Put yourself there. 3,000, 4,000 years ago. I don't know if it's that long. Maybe not. Then ran the one and opened the garden door. So when the servants of the house heard cry in the garden, they rushed in at the privy door to see what had been happened to her. And, okay, so what's really happening here? If we put ourselves in this story, that we have to separate ourselves from this and say that all of these are component parts that are playing out in the theater of the mind. And they represent something. They're not really happening. There's something that happens in the mind that this story is built on. We have to extract what that is. So then what do those people represent? The division, the temptations of life. And we're struggling. There's not something really doing it. Look back on your own life and say, what? There were no people that did it, but boy, there were things that I just wanted to do that I knew better. Oh man. Well, yeah, sometimes I would hope so. I think the person that's the called person, yes. The people that are not the called people, no. You will not have that experience. If you're the called person, you will look back on your life and go, God, I got regrets. That's why you're on the path. You want to rectify those regrets. Actually, more than that, you realize that you are a product of your bundle of thinking, and you want to extract yourself from that. You want an overall better life, understanding that you came through someplace unbeknownst to you, making judgment calls and doing the things that you did because that's where you came from, and now realizing that there's something bigger than that. That's what is happening here. These temptations are coming at us. But this individual is... Okay, so it goes down. They said before the people sent us for Susanna, the daughter of Chelcias, Joachim's wife. So they went. They made the accusation. Everybody came, all the kindred. Susanna was a very delicate woman, very beauteous to behold. So right there we have that beauty component part that was like in Sarai was so beautiful. Sarah, Abraham was afraid. Isaac was afraid that Rebecca was too beautiful. All of these are bingo right there. Boom. This is the component part that we're parallel to. And the wicked men command to uncover her face, for she was covered that they might be filled with her beauty. Therefore her friends and all that saw her wept. Then the 2 elders stood up in the midst of the people and laid their hands upon their head. And she, weeping, looked up toward heaven, for her heart trusted in the Lord. And the elders said, as we walked in the garden alone, this woman came in with 2 maids, and shut the garden doors, and the maids went away. Then a young man who was there hid came and had sex with her. But we stood in a corner of a garden, watching the wickedness. And we ran to them. But when we saw them together, the man we couldn't hold, because he was too strong, and he opened the door and ran away. But having taken the woman, we asked who the young man was, but she won't tell us. This is our testimony. Then the assembly believed them, as those were the elders and judges of the people. So they condemned her to death. Then Susanna cried out with a loud voice and said, O everlasting God, that knowest the secrets and knowest all things before they be. You know that they have borne false witness against me, and behold, I must die, whereas I never did such things as these men have maliciously invented against me. So as I sit back and try to interact with this mentally, I try to envision what's going on in this part of the story in my life. It's a little bit of a struggle, because obviously, again, it's not really happening. And my life didn't go this way. I took the bad path. I had to flood my world. I certainly did. So I'm trying to imagine what it was like to not have that happen, to be in the house where you were told you were wonderful and you're going to do fine here. This is the proper way to do it, where you were, nurtured in a manner that became your core structure, that was not a derogatory one. That happens to everybody. Anyway, this was somebody that's coming out good. So there's this internal temptation that's going on. Honestly, that's really there. Susanna put to death. It's time to let the world take over and for Susanna to fail. Your inner being, you've lost it. Your purity is going to be gone. You're going to turn it over. But Susanna turns to the higher awareness, the everlasting God, where we come from, that know all the secrets, and knowest all things before they be. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. You know that they both for false witness, malicious. This is us. This is an internal struggle of somebody that's turning away from temptation. I didn't do that. I went right for the temptation. But this is somebody turning away from it. And the Lord heard her voice. This person persevered. They got away and said, I'm not doing that. That's not my life. I'm going to go on to something bigger. I'm not going to get caught up in that. Therefore, when she was led to be put to death, something came in that okay. So this whole story happens then. I'll go through and read it. I am clear from the blood of this woman, which means I don't have anything to do with, I don't have any stock in what's going on with the life or death of this woman. And the people turned toward him and said, What do you mean by saying that? And he said, Are you such fools, you sons of Israel, that without examination or knowledge of the truth you've just condemned the daughter of Israel? Return again to the place of judgment, for they have borne false witness against her. Wherefore all the people turned again in haste. Who are all the people? It's all our qualities. It's the things that we lost that needed to be destroyed in the Genesis story. But in this case, they're not going that way. They're not going to need to be destroyed. And the elders said unto him, Come, sit down among us and show us. Since the Lord has given you the honor of an elder. Who are elders? It's temptations of life in this story. We're not conquering it. Nope. This is not that way, because we don't have to go destroy an earlier self. We remain Susanna as an inner being the entire way, while that consciousness is kind of out of the picture, which is kind of bizarre in this one. This is really told from the sake of keeping the inner self pure from, Daniel's the cold person. Let me keep working on it. Okay, separate these two. We'll take a look at them, make a comparison. This might almost be, God, this is the way you look at the material. You separate, you look at it all. You look at both sides of everything. That's how you analyze it. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. That's in Taoism. It's the very first line. It means it's a mental process, but you have to work that out. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The Tao is the pathway. The pathway that can be told is not the eternal pathway. the pathway that can be untold, the pathway that can be told is the not eternal one. What is the eternal pathway? Told can't be right. So the problem we have here is told. The Tao that can be taken is the eternal Tao. It's a mental path. You have to be able to work them all out that way. Maybe this is a lesson to say you got to separate this stuff out when you're looking at it. You got to get on both sides of the story. You have to examine it all. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What the hell is that? How do you do that? You have to think that stuff through. Poor, spirit. Spirit is what I live through in the background. It's the bundle of memories. If I'm devoid of all of those things, then I now have taken the mote out of my eye, effectively as well. All of them become analogous terms that represent the same thing up here, that we're functioning through a bundle of memories. However, in this case, Susanna doesn't get there. She does not become corrupted. Do you know what, though, as I read this, in the character of Daniel, I read vestiges of what Jesus is going to become many years later on. This is much earlier than Jesus material. But here we have somebody stepping in. It almost has vestiges of the story in the Bible of the woman who is going to be stoned for, she had been accused of being a whore by the men in the streets, and they were going to stone her, but Jesus intervenes and, writes something on the ground that nobody knows of and says that, let those of you who have not sinned cast the first stone. All right, well, let's get back to this, and I'll just go through it. I like to take those sidetracks because sometimes something just like, I don't know, you get something, a spark in your head, and that put the two aside, one from another, and I will examine them. He's examining them separately, and it's almost to me like if it's in my mind, I'm taking concepts and I'm examining them from different, I'm making sure that I'm really looking at them and poking holes in them. Now that might be something that I'm just putting into it. It might not be built into the story. But it is a thought process that is how you resolve this. If I was to try to provide another example of that, there's one Jesus teaching about if somebody asks you to go a mile with them, then go 2. And you look at that and think, well, in the physical world, what that means probably is, are you going to do that? If somebody says literally, if you don't interpret that, are you going to if somebody asks you to walk a mile with them, number one, are you going to do that? And number two, if they ask that, are you going to walk a second mile? That's kind of a silly spiritual teaching. You kind of look at that and go, all right, you're going to have to call that a metaphor. You have to do something with that. So what this means then is something different. I'll apply some thought to it and go, so here's me trying to understand this person's predicament. They got caught stealing. Who is it? Is it a kid that's from a well-to-do family that's been raised wrong and is cutting up and needs to be put reins on? Or is it a mother who is out destitute, who's got hungry kids and doesn't know how to feed them? You look at situations in the physical world, and you could come down on one side or the other of a teaching. Is it okay or not? I mean, what is good? What is bad? What is the situation? Everything becomes kind of flexible. At some point, you have to be somebody that doesn't just look at things in black and white, but understand that there's a flow of things going on. And when you're looking at things in black and white, you're just looking at moments of time and saying that's what's in place without realizing there's a big flow going on that you're a part of, and you have to separate from that somehow. But the thinking process is what gets you there, but also the understanding of this. So when I look at that and go, how do I make that mentally interactive? As far as the physical world, you could look at that and go, that's a wonderful lesson. Yes, try your best to understand where somebody's coming from. Oh my gosh, is that an important thing to do? But if you stop and go, there's another layer of that that's mentally interactive. I'm not there. Then you have to keep working at it. What does it mean for me? Who's asking me to go someplace? And I'm going to say this is a seek and you will find, knock, and it will be open sort of a thing. To me, the idea, honestly, of going that second mile is to get where I'm going. I don't know how to describe it any differently. There's a point where somebody says, walk a mile. That means read this material or understand this material or believe this material. Now, I can read the material, but I can be objective with it. I don't believe it at face value, but I don't just look at it at face value and say this is just garbage. Of course, the face value is not of my interest. I read through this and go, what are all of these patterns that are in here over and over again that honestly people go, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see the patterns. So that's where that certain kind of a brain comes in, where you see things conceptually that other people can't. That the anchored ship that cannot sail, the dog tied in the yard cannot escape, the goat chained up in the field cannot run away, the ball tethered to the pole, cannot fly off. All of those are different things. But the person that can see that there is one thing in all of them, that I am that, and whatever I hang on to, I can't escape, is the person that can understand the conceptual reading. People that can't see that, and there are people that can't. They can't see that sailing through the clashing rocks and barely making it in an Argonautica story is the same analogous location on a template conceptually as running through the Red Sea and barely making it. They go, those are not the same at all. They represent something. Crossing through something and barely making it. It's a crossing of a difficult threshold that's there. That is what is in common with both of them. Not what's different. What is different is carrying what is the same. So they were taken away from each other, and he called one of them and asked him, you're old in wickedness. Oh, that thou art waxen old in wickedness. Wow. You've been wicked for a long time. Now your sins. I didn't realize he judged him, or he said that right up front. Now your sins, which you have committed before time, are come to light. So this is all happening inside of us. We know what we've got going on. That's it. We're facing ourselves. You know what you have. You hide. But when I turn to look at you, yeah, all right. For you have pronounced false judgment and condemned the innocent, and had left the guilty go free. The innocent and the righteous shall not slay. The innocent and righteous you shall not slay. Then if you tell me under the... now then, tell me, what tree were you under when you saw them having sex? And he said, under a mastic tree. And Daniel said, very well, you have lied against your own head, for even now the angel of God has received the sentence of God to cut thee in two. The two right there is where that division comes in. Remember that, what that was? Two is a bad thing. You don't want a division, you want to be singular. 2 being 13 times, there we go. We've got something in the background that's teaching this, something at a deeper psychological level that is in this carrier. All right, so that division is something that is a bad thing. We don't want to be internally divided. Honestly, that means that we have conflict in our minds. If we don't have conflict, we are unified. If we have conflict, then we are two, we are divided, we are divorced. All of those are analogous terms, meaning that our inner and our outer selves are not coexisting in concert. There are times I consciously don't feel good because of things I have inside of me. Memories, desires, pain. If I don't feel good, that's because of things I'm carrying. That's it right there. She stayed away from that. All right, so anyway, he puts him aside, commands, he tells him to go, and he tells, bring me the other person. Your seed of, is that Canaan and not of Judah? Beauty hath deceived you, and lust has perverted your heart. Desire, so this is one he wants, desire. Thus you have dealt with the daughters of Israel, for they fear companied with you, but the daughter of Judah would not abide with your wickedness. So somehow he's done some corruption with other parts of you, but there's a part of you, maybe Susanna's the called one. Interesting. Is there a female called in Abraham material? I don't know. I'm not sure. This is so short. I don't think it's quite, it's not. She doesn't get corrupted, so never mind. That's wrong. Now therefore tell me, under what tree did you take them? What tree were you sitting under when you saw them? And he said, under a holm tree. And he says, well, you also lied against your own head, for the angel of God wait with a sword to cut you in two, that he may destroy you. With that all the assembly cried out with a loud voice and praised God, who saved them and trusted in him. So this is an internal, yea, I did not give in to that. I feel good. I can move on from it. I put it behind me and I've moved on. With that all the assembly cried out with a loud voice, and praise God, yep, I succumbed to the better judgment and the higher awareness instead of the ravenous collapse of the physical, joyful, whatever, the stuff we get into as we're living life. Yeah. And they arose against the two elders, for Daniel had convicted them of false witness by their own mouth. And according to the law of Moses, they did unto them in such sort as they maliciously intended to do to their neighbor, and put them to death. So whatever these internal struggles were, they're gone. Thus the innocent blood was saved the same day. You're okay. The internal struggle has been averted. You've moved on. Therefore, Chelseus and his wife praised God for their daughter Susanna with Joachim her husband, and all the kindred, because there was no dishonesty found in her. We live in a wonderful internal place. These are all parts of us. Conscious, subconscious, our inner self, all the qualities that we have, the joys, the desires, the wants, all the things that we have are our kindred, and they're all fine because there's no dishonesty, because we've resolved everything. What was it? Shame, dishonesty. That's what they were concerned about, isn't it? Why did Adam and Eve cover themselves in the Garden of Eden? Because they were ashamed of their nakedness. They wanted to cover her, but she stays uncovered by no dishonesty. Okay. From that day forth was Daniel had in great reputation in the sight of the people. Yeah, that sounds like this story is a setup for purity, but it's also setting Daniel up as a great person, as a great leader, a prophet, or something for the people. Okay, so that's how I interpret it. And if you look at things in there, you can make comparisons and see that not only do the numbers themselves, but the concepts themselves go from other places. This one was just fun because after looking at it, I realized, and I still get stuck in thinking, maybe she's like I just did there, maybe she's the called person. It's like, there is no called person. The corruption doesn't happen here. The corruption that was coming after, trying to create the corruption, was staved off. You didn't come in and the corruption didn't happen. So this is a fun story. It's very cool. It's very telling. It's fun. Anyway, you can see why they would want that out of the Bible. Well, I don't know. How easy is this to see? Like I said, until I saw patterns and had time to start going after this and learn this, I've read Susanna before, and it did not mean at all what I see today. This is just so hard to see. People don't have the time. Well, and that's not all there is to it. That's not all there is to it. It's not just a matter of time, but that's a considerable... The people that can do it, this is why they're not. Time gets in the way. All right, well, hope this was fun and interesting. I wanted to make those correlations, and some of them I didn't bring up. I don't want the video to get... It's already big as it is, but I don't want to keep bringing up material and reading through the Bible back and forth. But if you know the material well enough, you'll see, oh yeah, we see that 3, the 7 in the beginning, the 3, the 7 over here. We see that the woman is in the garden with the man, then the corruption happens, and then in one case the corruption goes on. But in the other case, the corruption is staved off. It comes after. It makes accusations, but it's trapped, it's divided, it's examined, it's looked at in all cases. Daniel emerges as a hero. The shame did not happen. It's a different teaching. All right, that's a wonderful one. Very old stuff. Hope this was fun and interesting. It's my opinion, isn't it? See you in the next video.